Picture this, dear viewer. California, the early 21st century. Society and culture have changed beyond recognition, becoming a nightmarish dystopia where people are forced by law to be nice to each other. A world run by power-hungry tyrants hiding behind a mask of compassion and righteousness, where every aspect of human behavior and thought is carefully controlled and conditioned so that nobody would dare to disobey. A world where all traces of aggression, individuality, ambition, and resilience have been ruthlessly purged, leaving behind a population of docile, timid, feminized, emotionally fragile weaklings that are ashamed and frightened of their natural impulses and are completely incapable of dealing with hardship or adversity. Anyway, let's talk about today's movie. Demolition Man is a sci-fi action film released in 1993, starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes as renegade cop John Spartan and ruthless criminal Simon Phoenix. It's a movie that's always had a special place in my heart, because on the one hand it's a fun, over-the-top action flick with all the good stuff you'd expect from early 90s cinema.
You're gonna regret this the rest of your life.
Both seconds of it.
But on another level, it's gained a bit of a reputation as the Nostradamus of the movie world, correctly predicting the modern rise of political correctness, overzealous censorship, liberal culture, sinister nanny state governments hiding behind a thin veneer of compassion, and fucking Zoom calls. It's a film that asks intriguing questions about the dangers of surrendering personal freedoms in the name of security, and if that all sounds a bit high-minded for a movie with scenes like this in it,
he doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells.
then allow me to enlighten you.
Nah, I've changed that. Illuminate.
Sorry, illuminate. The movie kicks off in the near future of 1996. God, I feel old. Where Los Angeles now looks more like a bad day in Baghdad. What was it with movies back then, portraying LA like the Battle of fucking Stalingrad? I'm looking at you, Predator 2. Anyway, whatever. So the police are caught in a shootout with Simon Phoenix, a crime lord who's taken a busload of hostages and barricaded himself into his fortified hideout. The police can't fight their way inside, but that's okay because John Spartan is on the case. Better known as the Demolition Man, Spartan has a habit of blowing stuff up whenever he gets involved. Haha, don't we all, mate? So he flies in by chopper and bungee jumps down to the rooftop below. I'd like to point out that a real dude actually did this, and there was a genuine concern that he might rebound back up into the rotor blades. They don't make them like this anymore, that's for sure. Anyway, Spartan kills a bunch of goons and fights his way inside, but instead of rescuing the hostages, he runs into Phoenix himself. And Spartan's like, "You're under arrest." And Phoenix is like, "Nah, I'm not." Because he's flooded the place with gasoline, which kind of makes me wonder, did Spartan's nose stop working when he came in here? Wouldn't he be a little bit suspicious of the huge pool of liquid spilling over the floor right where he's standing? Whatever. So Spartan can't shoot Phoenix without killing himself as well. Interesting setup. I wonder how he's gonna get out of this one. But then Phoenix is just like, fuck it, and sets the gas on fire anyway. Wait, what? That was your plan? Aren't you supposed to be relying on the threat of burning him alive rather than actually doing it? I mean, I'm pretty sure Spartan could still gun you down before he burns up. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Spartan just kind of runs through the fire, kicks the shit out of him, and demands to know where the hostages are. But Phoenix won't tell him. I love the foreshadowing here, by the way.
I swear, I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached.
Also, the script decides the building's about to blow up. What have I told you about leaving your massive barrels of C4 next to open gasoline canisters? Now, I'm no chemical expert, but how the fuck do you put C4 into barrels? It's not like it's a liquid you can pour. Whatever. They have a fight and Spartan knocks Phoenix out and carries him out of there just before the place blows up. And damn man, they really did flatten a whole building for this scene, and it looks spectacular. Unfortunately, that's when Spartan discovers that the hostages were still inside the building, and now they're all dead. So he gets arrested and charged with murder. which is kind of weird when you think about it. I mean, Phoenix was the one who kidnapped them, imprisoned them, rigged the place with explosives, and triggered them. Spartan did everything he could to prevent it. Also, he's a decorated police officer. Surely they'd believe his word over Phoenix's. But anyway, the script needs the rest of the plot to happen, so whatever. Both men are sentenced to be cryogenically frozen and given subconscious reprogramming to remove their violent instincts and rehabilitate them. I'd like to point out that this movie begins in 1996. They really believed that within 3 years, scientists would find a way to cryogenically freeze people and bring them back to life decades later without harming them, not to mention subconsciously altering their personalities. Talk about disappointing, man. We'd barely even invented the internet by 1996. Anyway, flash forward 36 years and Phoenix is woken up for his first parole hearing. It looks like an open and shut case because he's clearly still an asshole.
Stop it!
But then he unlocks his electronic handcuffs somehow, kills the guards and escapes like it's nothing. That's interesting. It's almost like someone told him the password. Anyway, then we flash over to the local police department where young officer Lenina Huxley is going about her day. Huxley's good at her job, but for some reason she's obsessed with 90s culture and dreams about fighting real criminals. See, things have changed in the past few decades. Crime, violence, disease, sex and drugs are all basically a thing of the past, and the world's become a peaceful utopia where nothing bad happens. God only knows what would become of Tatiana in such a place. Her entire life revolves around all of those things. Now, because there's no crime left to prevent, the police are basically irrelevant. That is, until Phoenix escapes the cryo prison and the police are mobilized to take him down. Needless to say, it doesn't go well. Not only is Phoenix stronger, smarter, and better at fighting than he was before, but he can also hack computers and trigger security systems.
Lucky number 7.
Nice. I love how he fucks around with this guy here. Wesley Snipes just had an absolute ball in this movie. Anyway, because they're not equipped to deal with a violent criminal like Phoenix, Huxley suggests that they defrost John Spartan to hunt him down instead. So the movie becomes a kind of cat and mouse game between the two men. Spartan's on the hunt for Phoenix, but he's usually one step behind. At the same time, he struggles to adjust to life in a totally unfamiliar world, and begins to uncover clues that it's not quite the perfect society it seems to be. At the same time, we begin to suspect that Phoenix's escape from prison wasn't an accident. He keeps hearing weird voices in his head, telling him to kill the leader of an underground resistance movement. And when he runs into this asshole after a shootout, he can't pull the trigger. Could there be a connection, I wonder? All of these different plot threads culminate in a revolution against the oppressive government and a final confrontation between Spartan and Phoenix before he can revive a whole army of criminals. Phoenix literally loses the head by the end. Sorry, couldn't resist. Much like Starship Troopers, Demolition Man is a movie that I didn't properly appreciate until I saw it years later from an adult perspective. On the surface, it's your typical early 90s action flick. There's lots of over-the-top fighting, close-range gun battles where the participants manage to hit everything except each other, lots of explosions, car chases for no other reason than to have car chases, and Stallone yelling and running in slow motion while stuff explodes behind him. It's all competently shot, with good stunt work and choreography, and some of the set pieces hold up pretty well even today. And damn, it's just nice to see practical effects being used again. It's also a surprisingly witty takedown of the progressive, touchy-feely culture that was starting to emerge in Hollywood in the early 90s. The macho bravado of the 80s was fading out, and with it, the action stars who made their names there. Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Willis and Van Damme all saw their careers wane from the mid-90s, and this movie is clearly a reaction to that. John Spartan embodies everything you'd expect from a classic action hero. He's big, gruff, and no nonsense. He smokes.
What's a Marlboro? It's a cigarette, any cigarette.
He eats junk food.
This is a rat burger.
He drives an old-fashioned sports car because it looks cool, and he struggles to adapt to the sensitive, caring world he's now living in. Not to mention the 3 seashells. So you want to know how it's done, eh? Right, you take the first 2 and shove them into as far as they'll go. Then you need to spread wide as far as you can. Now, there's a real danger your rupture. Finally, take the third one and all the way in. And for God's sake, don't, or you'll tear it right in half.
I can see how that could be confusing.
But the script also takes the time to show a more compassionate, thoughtful side to the man. Like when he discovers his family was killed while he was in cryosleep, or that the criminals he just beat up are basically desperate refugees scavenging for food. I like how he even rebukes Huxley when she cheers him on, all caught up in romantic notions of the world that he came from. It's a subtle but very effective subversion of the action hero archetype, suggesting that it's not quite as glamorous as we all believe. Phoenix, on the other hand, represents pure destructive chaos. Wesley Snipes is having the time of his life with this role, and it's great fun to watch. I love how he's just a total shithead to random people, like here when he arrives at the museum. He's not just a criminal out of necessity, the guy revels in the mayhem he's causing, and now he has the tools and expertise to make all his violent dreams come true. What's interesting though, is that Phoenix is also the one to kill arguably the main antagonist of the movie by convincing him to defrost some of his former gang members to help him out.
Will you please kill him?
It's pissing me off.
I can't believe you never saw this one coming, mate. Now this is all fine and dandy, and it makes for an entertaining movie to be sure, but there's a deeper message lurking beneath the flashy explosions and satirical humour. Demolition Man dares to pose some interesting questions about the wider impact of this change to society, gradually exposing the sinister flaws beneath the utopian facade, something that would absolutely not be allowed today. In a world where violence, aggression, profanity, competition, and physical intimacy have been made obsolete, and technology is gradually taken over to fill the void, superficially happy people are left unfulfilled and unable to cope with adversity, or even relate to each other. Like in this scene where some asshole is talking about his emotions to an automated terminal, rather than friends or loved ones. Although I have to admit, I do like the ego boost button.
Today.
The problem also spills over into romantic relationships, in that they basically don't exist anymore. Physical sex has been outlawed to prevent the spread of disease, and they have to use some weird virtual reality system to do it now. Shit man, I'd be willing to bet that Google and Facebook are working on this thing right now. I have to say though, I like this random, completely out of context booty call, just so they could get some TNA on screen. God, I love old action movies. It's interesting to note that Huxley's relationships with her co-workers are entirely platonic, and she only becomes physically attracted to Spartan when she watches him beating the shit out of some criminals. Wow, it's almost like the movie's suggesting that women tend to be attracted to strong, tough, confident, masculine men who can get stuff done, instead of, you know... The point is that every facet of Demolition Man's society, from music to movies to food, and even personal conversations and romantic relationships, has been censored and controlled and restricted. Personal freedoms have been curtailed in the name of peace, harmony, and safety, and the result is a weak, fragile, stagnant, repressed, culturally homogenized dystopia where nobody is allowed to be bold or ambitious or controversial. A world run by supposedly benevolent technocrats who preach tolerance and compassion but only use these things as tools to enhance their own power. Damn, this movie really was ahead of its time. On the opposite side of the coin, you've got a small group of resistance fighters led by a charismatic libertarian who rejected this fake utopia and now ekes out a living below ground in the decaying remains of the former city. Free but impoverished and disorganized, they pose a small but growing threat that could eventually spill over into widespread revolution. Hence, they have to be ruthlessly destroyed. The fundamental conflict of Demolition Man is the clash between lawless freedom and structured security, and the movie ends by suggesting that perhaps the best way forward is to find a balance between these two extremes. Not a bad idea, that. It's not a perfect film, of course. There are flaws in the narrative and subplots that get hinted at but dropped later. Like Spartan searching for his lost daughter, but then just going, nah, it'll be fine, and giving up. Or the idea that fully functional weapons would be on display in a public museum. Or the general stupidity of giving a violent criminal insane amounts of power and believing that you can somehow still control him. But overall, Demolition Man is a pretty good action movie with a solid cast, good fight scenes, and a script that's probably a lot smarter than people gave it credit for. And if you haven't seen it for a while, give it a watch in 2020. Trust me, you'll see it from a very different perspective. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Be well.
Be fucked.
Johnsman, you are fined 1